All right, welcome everybody to our Conscious Conversations evening. Do a bit of housekeeping first. Hello, Jenny. Thank you so much for joining us. Looking forward to this chat.
Thank you, Peter. Good to be here.
I've muted everybody else so that we kind of stay on focus. And you don't have to put your video on if you don't want to. I see there are some people. It's quite nice. You can scroll through and see all the people on. At the end of our chat, we will do a Q&A, and then I will allow everyone to unmute themselves if you want to speak. Otherwise, you can also use the chat option and ask any questions there. But it's 6:31, and it looks like we've good to go on all the technical sides. So should we begin, Jenny?
Let's go.
So as a bit of an intro, I mean, when did we meet? It was a long time ago now. It was one of our, we met at a friend's birthday party. Wasn't that right? Yeah.
It was fantastic because I was invited to a 50th and I was greeted at the door with a wheatgrass shot. And I arrived and I thought, oh my, this is my kind of party. And then you and Baron were doing all the catering, and it was the first time I really got excited about food. So it was brilliant.
Awesome. And then you invited us to come and do one of our courses at your home in Plet, which was freaking amazing. You have the most fantastic view there. And and since then we hang out every now and again, and we get to chat about all sorts of amazing, interesting things in the health world. So I haven't given people any really introduction into who you are and what you do. I mean, I think people know that you're a doctor because we wrote doctor on there. Maybe you can just give us 2 minutes. How did you get the title, and how did you end up there? And sure.
Yeah, well, from the age of about 14, 15, I just knew I wanted to be a doctor, but I had no idea what that really meant. So I went to medical school in Johannesburg at Wits, and I did 2 years of medicine and decided I really didn't want to finish. So I did a BSc as well, looked for other options, but landed up going back. And it makes a lot of sense because my wish and my service is to help people. However, in the medical system, I never really found a niche. I always felt much more like a maverick on the outside because the system is so structured and so unidimensional, and that really didn't fit for me. So over the years, I did many things. And then about 20 odd years ago, I got heavy metal poisoning, mercury, lead, arsenic, bit of cadmium, a couple of other things thrown in, and I was really ill. And that was what catapulted me onto a deep healing journey, my dark night of the soul. And that is where I learned about health, wellness, diet in particular. And my body was my teacher, because at medical school, they don't teach you anything about nutrition.
I was going to ask you that. That's also a curious thing, and often people don't realize that.
Absolutely. I don't remember one lecture on nutrition or diet. And in fact, a couple of years ago, there was a conference in George where I was going to get continuing education points, and it was about chronic diseases, diabetes, heart disease, etc. And after 2 days, I stood up and I asked them, where's the discussion about food? It still is not included, which is, that's a big pity. And, it's a gaping error in the medical system.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, to me, at the moment, especially with this coronavirus story going on, I don't watch the news because I haven't had a TV in many years, but as far as I'm aware, the only thing that's being spoken about is when the vaccine is here. No one's talking about anything else you can do for your health or wellness. It just seems to be completely absent in the whole conversation.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that one of the gems, one of the gifts that will come out of this whole COVID epidemic is an awakening in people people then can decide, well, how can I actually make sure that I am healthy? What can I do to maximize the health of my body? And if that comes out of it, that then is a gift.
Absolutely. So health is definitely a lot more than just pharmaceuticals then. That's certainly something you've learned over the years.
Yeah, and so I did a little bit of medicine, and I did family planning, and through the years I did a lot of alternative forms of healing. And so I learned that for my own personal work, I did a lot of mental, emotional healing work, stress relief, that sort of work. And then 2 years ago now, I had a diagnosis of breast cancer, and that catapulted me onto another whole journey where I'm learning very much what you and Baron, as you know, you teach, which is the whole terrain. So you say, what is health? Health is the diet, the nutrition that you eat, the thoughts that you think, the toxins you're exposed to. It's the whole package, which is absolutely vitally important. Vitally important.
Yeah, I mean, I always try and make a point of that. Thanks for reminding me that there is this paradigm of the healing, which is the terrain theory versus the current model that I think allopathic medicine is very steeped in, the germ theory, where, you know, the germ theory says they're bugs and germs and things, and they come into you and they make you sick, and then you got to have some poison that kills them, and hopefully it doesn't kill you, at least not outright. The terrain theory goes, your body and your environment is intrinsically linked and connected, and the more garbage you put in, the more garbage it's going to push out. And sure, I mean, that's a message that is so important, especially now with the whole fear of a virus, which is actually just turning out to be about as strong as the flu.
Yeah, it's really important. And the germ theory, and also there's another strong school of thought that everything is your genes, it's your genetics. And that is not true, because what they have shown is if you take a cell, you take a healthy cell, and you take out the nucleus, which is the control room, and you put in a cancer cell, theoretically that cell should become cancerous, and it doesn't. And if you do the opposite and take a cancer cell, take out the nucleus, put a healthy nucleus in, it should be healthy. That doesn't happen either, because what is really important is the tissue in which the cell is resting. The whole environment of the cell is what is absolutely key, and that is the terrain. That is the whole terrain theory.
Sure, I'm busy reading a book by Sayagyi at the moment, Regenerate, and I've just finished that chapter where he speaks about the terrain and how important that is. Bruce Lipton's spoken about it for years too. Epigenetics.
Yeah, and I think just a very simple analogy is that if people garden and you are growing some fabulous veggies, and one veggie is not doing so well, you don't just go and just pour insecticide over it. That's not the first thing you do. You look at, okay, what is the soil? Is it in the wind? Is it getting enough sun? Is it getting enough water? That is the terrain. That is the terrain theory, and we apply that to our bodies instead of just bombing it with heavy duty pharmaceuticals.
Sure, absolutely.
And to say that those pharmaceuticals do have a place. I'm not knocking all of standard of care. They do have a place, a very specific place at certain times for certain people.
Absolutely. And then you could also look at vitamin A and D. You know, like the nutrients of those plants, two of which I believe are massively important in holding your immune system in a positive space.
Yeah, and in fact, the lovely lady, well, the reason why you and Baron came to my house that many years ago is because I don't like to spend much time in the kitchen. And I invited you because I wanted you to teach the lovely lady in my house, Tundi, how to do raw food. And she asked me about this new steroid that they've just discovered is good for COVID. And she asked me what I think. And the point is that they've had limited, the research is limited, and they've said only if somebody's really, really, really sick would you give them a steroid on a ventilator?
Mm-hmm.
However, what I've learned in the whole integrative oncology program that I just finished, and you spoke to it, vitamin A, vitamin D, if someone has a COVID storm, it's almost identical to an autoimmune flare, an autoimmune reaction. And my first choice would be vitamin A, vitamin D, and if you can, intravenous vitamin C. And those should do the job. You shouldn't need to go very much further than that.
Sure.
For COVID, for autoimmune things, yeah, that would be the treatment of choice.
And I mean, you study this deeply. There's a lot of research backing those 3 nutrients.
Yes, yes. Very, very much so. Very much so. Particularly, what is interesting is that every single cancer patient that I've worked with, including myself, in the beginning have very, very, very low vitamin D levels. So vitamin D is actually not really a vitamin, it's a hormone. And we need it for every cellular function in the body. So it is absolutely vital, and people who have darker skins need more vitamin D than those of us with lighter skins. So yeah, it's absolutely critical. It's key, key, key.
Sure. I remember right at the beginning of this outbreak, I was asked, why is South Africa's number so low? And I was like, well, maybe because it's summertime and everyone's vitamin D is up. And I saw some media articles just shooting down that perspective as though it was some kind of heretic statement.
Yeah, it's there is a big push for the vaccine, and there is a big push for pharmaceuticals. So yeah, they will shoot it down. And I think that there will be a big push to globally vaccinate. And my suggestion is don't touch it. Don't let them vaccinate. No.
Yeah, avoidance is key here. But I mean, it's so great that there is so much that can be done. And I mean, this is why this kind of conversation is so important, I feel, at this point, because people often don't know that there are things they can simply do that'll massively change their outcomes. Yeah.
And I think if you had to ask me the starting point, I would say it's food. It's diet. Because what we eat is absolutely key. And I mean, this is the basis of what you've been doing for so many years, and it is absolutely vital. And the standard American refined foods is absolute poison, absolute poison. Another thing that I have found is so key, particularly in the cancer population that I'm working with, one is vitamin D, and the other one is control of glucose, blood sugar. And that is always about carbohydrates. The carbohydrates, particularly the refined carbohydrates, will push up your blood sugar, and then that has a whole cascade of health consequences. So I think it's really, really the absolute key starting point is food and diet.
Sure. And I mean, if your blood glucose is up consistently, that clearly isn't going to be great for your immune system, right?
Absolutely not. Because when your blood sugar goes up, it pushes up the insulin, because you need the insulin to drive the glucose back into the cells. And insulin is really dirty. It creates a lot of free radicals. It's implicated in aging, and the high glucose, high insulin levels are really not your friend. Also, if you think of the mechanism, we're talking about cancer specifically here, and it applies to other chronic diseases. In 1920 odd, there was a scientist called Otto Warburg who won the Nobel Prize for medicine. And what he did is he showed how cancer cells metabolize. And one of the things cancer cells do is they use glucose. So to me, it's an absolute no-brainer. Why feed them? Why feed them with glucose? Sure. So yeah, that's one of the keys.
I heard a statistic the other day that said that 40% of the American population is clinically obese, and I think South Africa is leading the world even higher. And I mean, obviously, that's directly implicating sugar overload, because I mean, the excess sugar just gets stored, right?
Yeah, and to clarify, sugar is sugar, and it's really not ideal. Anything white, so you're talking about white bread, white rice, millipap, grains, white, are immediately converted to sugar. So if you're eating all these foods, that equals sugar. So it's sugar, and it's also all the other refined carbohydrates that immediately become sugar that are the problem.
Sure. And so, I mean, in your health journey, you had to then, I expect, cut out a lot of sugars. And I know we've chatted a bit about it, leading you into a pretty ketogenic diet. How was that process?
Well, it was really interesting because I was eating better than most people I know. My food was as clean as I could. I was eating as organic. I was eating, at one point, not very much animal protein, which I've subsequently learned is important. And I looked 9 months pregnant. My belly was huge. And what I realized is that even though I was eating well and most of my carbohydrates were vegetables, they were the root vegetables, my body specifically does not know what to do with glucose. It did not know, and still does not know very well, how to metabolize glucose. So what I have learned for me is that I really can't do very many carbohydrates, and all fruit and vegetables are carbohydrates. And so that catapulted me onto the ketogenic diet. So the ketogenic diet, for those who don't know in a nutshell, is most of us walking around who are eating carbohydrates and the food around are using glucose as fuel to fuel our bodies. When you really drop the level of carbohydrates to between 20 to 50 grams a day, your body switches over to using fat for fuel. And when you start using fat for fuel, you produce what they call ketones, and that is the basis of a ketogenic diet. And you know, people are saying a ketogenic diet, oh, it's new. It's not. The ketogenic diet was developed in about 1920, specifically for children who had epilepsy, and they kept fitting and they didn't know what to do. It's called intractable epilepsy. They wouldn't stop fitting. And they found that when they put these kids onto a ketogenic diet, they stopped fitting. So we have scientific evidence from the 1920s showing that a ketogenic diet is absolutely fine. And if you go back in history, my belief is that is actually how we are hardwired to live, because we never had supermarkets. We would eat when we could. We would have a kill. We would forage nuts, seeds, etc. And we would go through periods of fasting. And so that is, I believe, how our bodies are hardwired to be either in ketosis, a ketogenic diet, fasting, and being what they call fat adapted.
Yeah, I mean, that's our Paleolithic ancestor roaming around, finding whatever they could. There was no refined anything; it didn't exist. So lots of fiber, proteins, fats wherever they could find it. You know, it certainly isn't new. But quite often, from a raw and certainly a vegan point of view, ketogenic isn't even on the page. There's just too much fruit sugars, carbohydrates in there. So I'm curious. I mean, if we talk about you know, where we came from as a species, metabolic flexibility is something that we've spoken about quite a bit. That you know, you should or could shift depending on what's available seasonally. You know, if there's a glut of some kind of fruit, you eat it until there's none left. But because of the amount of carbohydrates, the sheer volume available today, I think you were telling me that's quite damaged.
Yeah, I agree. And what I've learned is that eating carbohydrates is the vegan vegetarian lifestyle is, at the end of the day, not ideal, for the simple reason that it is so high in carbs. It's carb loaded. And what they found is that most grains and legumes, sadly, have quite a lot of glyphosate residues in them, because most of the places where they produce, there's drift from the non-organic farms. So not only are you getting a high carbohydrate load, but also there's quite a lot of glyphosate. And down the line, carb loading is not ideal. And you spoke about metabolic flexibility, and I think this is important because we are all so different. So there absolutely is not one diet that is good for everybody. What the metabolic flexibility means, as you said, is the body's ability to elegantly adapt from glucose to fat to glucose to fat. And if that metabolic switch is efficient, that is ideal. That is absolutely ideal. But if you have too much carbohydrates, you get into that whole glucose cycle that I was talking about earlier on.
So for most people growing up in a Western diet situation, I mean, that's heavy carb. Would you say there's some level of damage then that has occurred in that flexibility?
Absolutely, very much so. And I have just completed a really intensive mentorship program with a fabulous woman called Dr. Naisha Winters, who is a naturopath. And I came to her through the journey with cancer. And at the age of 19, she was diagnosed with end-stage 4 ovarian cancer. And they basically said to her, sorry, there's nothing else you can do. You know, go home and get your affairs in order. And 27 years later, she's traveling the world teaching doctors about integrative oncology. Wow. And she absolutely says that even though it's touted as really good, a vegan diet in particular is not ideal. And I know you've spoken about your whole journey with protein, which you know, it's really fantastic. However, we need small amounts. We don't need a lot, but we need small amounts of complete protein. And you can only get that from animal protein that has all the essential amino acids that we need. And that is needed for cellular function. And also, if you're having a little bit of protein, then you are reducing your carb load as well. And I did see on the screen a message from my daughter to explain glyphosate. Glyphosate is the toxin in the herbicide Roundup. So when they spray Roundup on all our veggies, we land up getting really poisoned, basically, with glyphosate. Yeah.
So would you say, I mean, shifting to a more ketogenic type diet can bring that metabolic flexibility back online again?
Yeah, I would perhaps say low carb. Ketogenic for those who feel they want to do it. And for those who want to do a ketogenic diet, it is a process. And I think it's important to know that you don't just go keto. There is a process of doing it. But I think everybody can go low carb. And I think that is really, really helpful. So just to cut the carbs, especially the refined carbohydrates. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, I listened to quite a few interesting lectures over 2 years ago now on ketogenic states, and went on a few ketogenic fasts myself. And the first one was hell, it was terrible. I mean, I'd done different fasts over the years, juice fasts, water fasts, but never got to experience anything like dropping all the carbohydrates out of my diet. It was rough. I mean, they talk about keto flu. For the first 3 days, you feel absolutely terrible as your body shifts over. But I found over the years, it's become easier and easier. If I now do a week-long keto fast, I hardly even notice. It just switches over so easily.
And that's the metabolic flexibility. And another reason why in the beginning it feels perhaps bad is because toxins are stored in the fat. So when you start doing a ketogenic diet and you start mobilizing those fat stores, you're mobilizing all the toxins as well. But I have to say that once you are established in ketosis, I don't know a better feel-good feeling. And after a 3 or 5 day fast, that reset, that feel-good factor is phenomenal, absolutely amazing. So yeah, and it must be built up, and you must, if ideally work with somebody that can guide you through it, who knows what they're doing. But once you're there, it's brilliant.
Sure. I mean, I see Karen's got a question there. I don't know the people she's talking about specifically, but I mean, earlier you were talking about how different people, need different diets. Is someone recommending a high carb diet for diabetics?
Ouch. So I'm learning a lot, and I'm learning all the time. And there is a really, really fascinating field that I have to say I don't know a lot about, and I'm learning, called nutrigenomics. So what they are doing is they are able to take your DNA, and they do a whole genetic a report. I mean, these reports are like 90 pages long, and according to your genetic profile, your cultural background, your ancestry, all of that will impact what type of diet is advised. And there is a particular genetic marker called FAD. If you are FAD 1 or 2, you never want to be vegan. You definitely always want to have animal protein, because it's those people that start getting into trouble. So it won't apply to all, but the genetic background, culture, etc., will make a difference.
Sure.
So knowing all of that is helpful to know which way to go.
Yeah, and I mean, it's so great to have so many different options, because ultimately you are your own experimenter, and you're going to try different things throughout your life and see what works for you and what doesn't. And being honest about your results is really the only key you have there.
Yeah. And the more work you do, I find the more sensitive the body becomes. So your body will tell you, your body will tell you. And if you're listening, you will know, oh, no, that didn't work for me. Yeah, I feel really good when I do that.
Yeah.
And that is the journey that I went on for years, my body telling me yes, no, yes, no. And I think at the end of the day, just intuitively knowing what works for you is absolutely key. It's your journey.
Absolutely, sure. That's profound stuff, really.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, I've also chatted to you about gut bacteria and how important that is in overall health, and especially immune health. I mean, I believe that more than 70% of your immune system sits in your gut. So what have you learned over the years around that?
Yeah, absolutely key. So it's called the gut microbiome, as you said, and there are trillions and trillions of bacteria that live in our gut, and they are absolutely key. And what they're finding is that we thought that everything comes from here down, but what they're finding is most of the information actually comes from the gut up, 80% that way. So they've done so much research. For example, if your gut is disturbed, it's linked to anxiety, it's linked to all sorts of mental, emotional things, because the gut and the brain, well, your gut is your second brain. And as my daughter reminded me the other day, they come from the same neural cells when they are forming in the womb. So it makes absolute sense that the gut and the brain are linked. And it's really, really imperative. And having a good gut bacteria is key to health, absolutely key to health, yeah.
So, I mean, I know you did some testing on your own, because I think for people to just start piling in tons of expensive probiotics that may not be necessary. I mean, that's one of the things I love about you. A lot of your work is let's do the test. Let's see if you need it. Like, you don't have to waste money on stuff that's not going to be effective for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And yes, probiotics, you can do that through food. And I mean, that is what you've been saying. So the organisms that we really need are the soil-based organisms that you get from, ideally, if you can, and I mean, that's why I love coming to you, is you just pick it from your own garden, put it on the plate, and then you eat it. And as important, you know, fermented foods, good bacteria, as important is eliminating toxic foods that will disrupt the gut microbiome. And one of the most toxic foods is gluten.
Okay.
Gluten wreaks havoc. Glyphosate and the toxins and the pesticides wreak havoc in the gut. So as well as introducing the good bacteria, you also need to eliminate the things that will destroy the gut bacteria. And also, I mean, antibiotics. And antibiotics, the main source of most people's antibiotics may not be a pill from the pharmacy. It is the commercially grown meat. So it's the meat and the chickens that are fed antibiotics, that are fed growth promoters. Those are huge disruptors of the microbiome. So yeah, I mean, you say this all the time. An absolute given is food as clean as possible is absolutely key. And that goes for across the board, whatever you're eating, as clean as you can.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a good thing to just remind people too, is we're in no way talking about factory farm animals here. That's atrocious. It always is. And it's massively damaging to your health. If you're going to choose to consume animal foods, you need to find extremely clean sources of those.
Exactly. Yeah.
Can I use eggs as a source of protein from Sonia?
Eggs are a fabulous source of protein. Yes. And I would just add that sadly in our country, most chickens are, even if they're free range, are supplemented with GMO corn from agri. So if you can try and find chickens and eggs that are not fed GMO corn, that is ideal. And yes, eggs are a fabulous source of protein. Yeah.
I'm lucky. I have my own chickens. Well, they're not my chickens, and my daughter Katara's chickens, and they give us great eggs. And I have a great feed source thanks to you, Jenny. Put me in touch with Eddie from Eddie's Eggs, who does a great GMO-free feed.
Yeah.
So you were chatting a little bit about mental and emotional health. I wonder if we could maybe shift gears a little bit to the polyvagal nervous system and what you've learned about that and how important that is, because I always find that a fascinating topic when we chat.
Yeah, this is my latest soapbox, and I'm so loving it. So there is a guy called Dr. Stephen Porges, who about 20 or so years ago developed what he calls the polyvagal theory. And I mean, to me, what I'm really learning is this links into absolutely everything. So his theory is quite complex and his books are quite difficult, but in a nutshell, what he is saying is that everything in our lives, all the filters through which we view the world, are determined by how safe we feel and how supported we are. So absolute safety is key. And I think just being human is traumatic. I mean, all of us in some way, shape or form have experienced some form of trauma, even if it's just on the playground where kids don't want to play with us. So what they used to say is that in an event where, I mean, everybody uses lions and tigers, I find that really interesting. In the old days, when we were chased by lions and tigers, what happens is our sympathetic nervous system kicked in, the adrenaline pumps, and we would get the rush and we would be able to run, mobilize. And then they said that when you relax, you rest and digest. So it was the sympathetic, run, parasympathetic, rest and digest. What Dr. Stephen Porter says is there's another link, and he talks about the vagus nerve, and the vagus nerve is fascinating because it's the 10th cranial nerve. It comes through the back of the head, goes down through the neck, and I'll tell you why this is important, goes down through every single organ of our body, through the diaphragm, into the gut, into the perineum, into the sex organs, and there are nerve fibers everywhere. So there is the vagus nerve splits into two. So in the front is the ventral vagus, which is the most advanced, and at the back is a dorsal vagus. And we can either run or we can rest and digest. But if we are threatened, another option, which in trauma they did not speak much about, is freeze. So people can become immobilized. And if you think of a lizard or a reptile, when they're attacked, they play dead. It's feigning death. And that, in trauma, people have been absolutely slated for, why didn't you run? Why didn't you attack? It's a physiological response. You cannot run if you're immobilized. And where I love this is that if we speak about stress, and stress is also a very, very big determinant of health, the stress may not be a tiger. The stress may be that internal voice, that internal driver that keeps nattering away, that keeps criticizing. That is stress as well. So what happens, we were talking about glucose. When we get stressed, our cortisol shoots up, our glucose is elevated, our insulin, we come back to that whole glucose insulin cycle. And then it starts impacting on our genes. You were talking about Bruce Lipton. We were talking about the tissues in which the cells rest. So stress is epigenetically really dirty because it affects that whole milieu, the tissue in which the cell is resting. So stress is really important. And if you know about this and know about the polyvagal theory, and you start catching yourself in those moments where that chatterer, where somebody cuts in front of you in traffic, there are ways where you can really stimulate the vagal nerve to bring yourself back. And the simplest and quickest and easiest, which we always have available, is the breath. So if we start, and if the vagus nerve comes down through the diaphragm, the abdominal breathing, that immediately stimulates the vagus nerve. Because it comes down through the throat, we can gargle. And a really good hack is to have a glass of warm water next to your basin in the morning. And if you just gargle, hum, chant, all of that will stimulate the vagus nerve. And what I found really interesting is that a lot of people are doing Wim Hof now, the breathing and the cold immersion.
Yeah.
It's just vagal stimulation. You're just stimulating the vagus nerve with a deep breathing, with a cold water. Hey, we're stimulating the vagus, which helps us rest and digest, because when you are stressed, the body cannot heal. The body can only heal when in rest and digest. If there's any form of stress, all the energy is going to managing that stress. So it's really, really, really key in my world anyway.
I mean, I think for everyone right now, sure. I did Wim Hof. I got in the ice bucket and did the whole process. And my dam luckily is freezing cold, so I get to do that regularly too. But that breath part is, can't emphasize that enough. I mean, every morning I do a little meditation with my team in Cape Town, and breathing is a part of that. And just reminding them consistently, if you're in a space of stress, just go back to your breath. And sometimes it's the hardest thing to catch that moment when you're just spiraling down into those old patterns of stress and reactivity. Just to, there's a key moment there to catch yourself, or just to go back to your breath, deep abdominal breathing.
Well, I often find that I'm holding my breath. When I catch myself, I'm actually just not breathing.
Yeah.
So it might even just be watching the news and what is going on is, You know, I just watched a trauma conference with Stephen Porges and a couple of other trauma specialists, and they're talking about the second wave of the pandemic may be a mental health fallout from stress and people not having enough resources to know how to manage that. And then that impacts on the biology. So it's really key just to have a couple of hacks. In fact, there's a very good summit on at the moment called The Mind, Body, and the Vagus Nerve. And some of the speakers are really, really good, and it's for free. So it's worth listening to just to sort of have some ideas of how to manage this really, really important issue.
And then the world is so crazy that the breath being the most important thing to bring you back into a space of calm, you can't breathe because you've got a mask on your face. Like, who thought that was a good idea?
Oh gosh, yeah.
Absolutely. So the other thing that I know that you're into, because I've joined you in quite a few classes, which I think is perfect at this point, in terms of getting your body into a space of relaxation and getting back into, well, not quite rest and digest, but just loosening up, is dancing. I mean, I'm a huge fan of dancing, and I know that you've gone through some very interesting processes. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the last couple of years I have been doing movement medicine, which is a really very beautiful modality to help to manage life. And one of the most important things, and it comes back to the vagus nerve and stress, is it's really important for us to get back in our bodies. And when we get stressed and when we get anxious, we're a lot here in the mind. And to me, the first place to go is be where your feet are. So if you can really concentrate on where are your feet, feeling them on the floor, where are you, bringing yourself back into the body, and then movement is really important as well. So it's easy, especially in lockdown. Put on some really good music and just move the body is a lovely way to just breathe, vagus nerve stimulation, bring yourself back to the body, and it's a really, really lovely way of managing life's happenings. And what I love about the dance and about movement is you don't actually have to know what the issues are, because when you're in your body, the innate intelligence of the body moving will help you process, not needing to know the story or what it is. So yeah, I love that.
And that's a huge one, because I can save you countless amount of hours and money in a therapist's office trying to dissect your history when it's actually held in your physical body, and you just need to breathe and move and let it be released.
Yeah. And in my experience, and I'm very grateful for many therapists and psychologists, and they have a fabulous, place in helping, particularly in the pandemic. And in my own personal experience, it's never, the mind doesn't heal. If the mind could heal, we could say, oh, think that way or do that or be that, and we do it, but that doesn't happen. So what I have found for myself is I need to move from this driver, and mine is really strong, into the body and into the heart. And that for me is where healing happens.
Sure, that's profound. As good a place as any to wrap up our conversation. Sure. Well, thank you so much for that and for your time. I mean, let's do 10 minutes of Q&A to see if anyone's got some interesting questions for us. I will try and click on something that lets everyone ask questions if they want to. Here we go. So guys, now's your chance for the next 5-10 minutes. If you guys have any questions, you can type it or you can unmute yourself and speak it. Maybe we've just done such a good job. Oh, there's a long one from Adele. I'm new to the ketogenic diet, so I was Googling some plans while you've been talking, and coffee is a big item. Why?
There's a new phase, particularly with the bulletproof coffee. I mean, coffee does not have to be part of the ketogenic diet. And also to clarify, there are different ketogenic diets, and some of the ketogenic diets are very high in animal protein and meat and sausages and things like that, which I don't like at all. You can do almost a vegetarian ketogenic diet. And coffee is really good for people who want to extend the interval between meals, and we call that intermittent fasting. So one of the easiest ways to start a really potent health hack is to slowly extend the period between dinner and breakfast. So if you finish, and I'm going to get to the coffee, I am getting there. So if you finish dinner at about 6, 7 at night, if you can wait 13, 14, 15, 16 hours before you eat again, that's called intermittent fasting. What people have found is that in that period of extending between meals is if you have a bulletproof coffee, which is often some coffee with some MCT oil or coconut oil, it helps you extend that period of fasting. So yeah, many plans do include coffee in that way.
And I found for myself that you know, coffee, it's quality again. You need to make sure you get certified organic. You need to make sure it's not moldy, that it's fresh. And then you know, because coffee is obviously very stimulating, it's going to dilate cell walls. It's going to drive whatever you have it with. So if you're going to be having coffee, make sure that you put as much amazing stuff in there. I mean, I put reishi mushroom powder, for example, with coffee when I'm going to have it, so that it's, you know, still has that effect, but it's balanced a little bit more.
Yeah.
I also just want to mention, I mean, this is the book that you recommended I get a little while ago. It's Naisha's book, and you know, she's talking about a diet that's like 70% fat, 60-70% fat. So you know, often people think ketogenic and they just think meat, and that's not what it is at all. And so it's great that came up again, just to clarify for people. I mean, I've just launched our protein powder, and you could take a vegetarian-based protein powder that gets you a lot of your protein, that reduces your requirement for meat even more.
So just to clarify, the ketogenic diet is about 70 to 80% fat, good fats. It's and again, we're talking about quality here. Good fats are really, really important, like coconut oil, avocado, good quality butter, MCT oil, you know, nuts, macadamias, all of those are good. The vegetable fats, bad news. Canola, bad news. The refined hydrogenated fats, bad news. So again, we come back to quality. So about 70 to 80% fat, a percentage protein depending on your needs, and very, very low carb. So it must be low carb, between 20 and 50 grams a day.
Okay, fantastic. Oh, the questions are coming in thick and fast now. Where do we find info for the mind body vagus nerve webinar? Should they just Google that?
Yeah, or if you want, I can send the link to you afterwards, Peter. And yeah, or it's a company called Health Means, and I think it's called the Mind Body Vegas Summit with. But I can get you the link. Yeah,
I'm sure that'll come straight up in a search.
Yeah.
Dude has got a great question. I understand we need some animal protein, but I also read that meat is inflammatory and fish is mercury and pollution. What is optimal for a diet that also protects you as much as possible from cancer? And there we go. Di already posted the Vagus Nerve Connection Summit. Let's slow down. Thanks.
Good. Excellent. Yeah, the issue of protein, I have found really difficult. I would love to hear your podcast on protein, Peter, but I know that I have found the whole protein issue really, really difficult, because I was happily eating local fish called Mars bunker, which is completely delicious. It's like our local mackerel, and I sent my blood for testing and my mercury was off the charts, and they said to me, you've got to stop eating fish. And it's like, you've got to be kidding. It's small local fish. Anyway, so I sent the fish to a laboratory. Sadly, it was full of mercury and lead and arsenic and cadmium. So if I have fish, I only use the tiny little sardines, and I do that periodically. Meat, I drive all the butchers mad, and at the moment I am only eating venison that I've grilled. The guy, and I have to say, he does hunt it, and he assured me that the animals run so fast there's no chance you can ever put anything in them. So if you're having meat, it's venison, and then finding a clean source of chicken. And I have to say that the protein issue is difficult. And maybe if you want, I can give some resources. And yes, that is important, because if you have dirty protein, it is going to it is going to contribute to ill health in some way, shape or form.
Absolutely, that was great. For me, hemp seeds are just one of my great sources of protein. I mean, they contain amazing array of nutrients, as well as the essential aminos, as well as the branch chain aminos, and yeah, very clean, certified, another great source you can get.
And your new plant protein powders are fantastic. They just arrived today.
Oh, awesome. Okay, great.
Yeah,
I think we did pretty good on those flavors. I mean, one of the few people who know about monk fruit, which is the sweetener I used, so we can keep the sugar levels down, but still, have the protein there.
Yeah.
Shireen asks about damage that's done to endothelial cells by fat.
The whole fat myth, I mean, they did such a good job at vilifying fat. So in the 1950s, there was a physiologist called Ansel Keys who did some really, really, really bad science and decided that fat causes heart disease. What he did is he completely cooked the books, and he completely fiddled the results. However, it got ingrained into the whole psyche. Also, to understand that at the time when he was vilifying fat, the American government was supporting the soybean and the grain farmers, and they wanted to sell more grains. So fats, again, if you're having the refined fats, the hydrogenated fats, the vegetable oils, yes, they will cause damage, they will cause problems. So the fats need to be, again, quality, 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 particularly the vegetable fats like avocado, like macadamia, very high in fat, your coconut oils, clean. Those are the fats, are great. Other fats, yes, they are a problem.
Fantastic. Someone was asking if matcha can do a similar thing as coffee. I cycle. I don't like using one stimulant or any stimulant every single day, so I will often do matcha instead of coffee. I don't know if you found matcha. I know matcha is green tea. It has amazing other health benefits. Jackie wants to know if I can share Eddie's chicken feed. Jackie, you can check out Eddie's eggs. I think it's .coza, and just email them. He does sell it. It's part of his business, so I'm sure he'll be able to help you out.
Yeah.
And then Di, let's do this one as the last one. We're ticking along. I've used colonics to assist a sluggish digestion. What are your thoughts on that with regards to disrupting the microbiome? And some suggestions, please, on the best options for reseeding the gut.
Yeah, so I personally don't like colonics, as I feel that there is too much disruption of the gut microbiome. However, that said, I think that coffee enemas on a periodic basis are incredibly good, because a coffee enema can stimulate the liver without that stimulatory effect of actually drinking coffee. And to reseed the gut, because if you do a coffee enema, it also doesn't go as far as a colonic, which will go right up into the colon. You can reseed with the soil-based probiotics, the liquid probiotics. So to do a coffee enema, make sure that the gut is really clean, and then put about 10-15 mils into a bucket with some clean water, and then repopulate the gut that way. And also not to do it too often, because yes, it will deplete the microbiome.
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, I know years ago when I was doing some fasting, I was told that if your body is not in a fasting space, you're kind of reversing peristalsis if you're doing regular colonics. So Kenny wants to know about quail meat and eggs. I think any animal that you're curious about, you need to find out where it's living, how it's growing, what it's being fed. Is it being pumped full of hormones and antibiotics? It doesn't really matter what animal. I mean, often people ask me about ostriches. I'm like, ostriches are the worst you could eat, because they're a wild animal and they're held in captivity and they're not used to that. So they have to pump them full of toxic stuff. So yeah, get hold of the quail farmer and ask them.
And if anybody can give a source of quail eggs and also duck eggs, because they're very, very rich. So if anybody has a clean source of quail and duck, I'd be really interested. So yeah.
There we go. You're gonna have to get some ducks there.
I'm looking.
Awesome. Okay, wow. Well, that was awesome. Thanks for the questions, everyone, and thank you so much for your time, Jenny. I'm sure everyone really appreciated it. I certainly did. And I mean, I don't know. I mean, I know you do offer a little bit of support to people with cancer situations, but right now you're like full up, right? I mean, if people want to know more about what you do or get in touch, is there a way? Or is this the only method?
No, people are welcome. My email is Jen Levin, JenLevin @mweb.coza.
Wow.
And we can just start that way. I'm in the process of getting a website together so that at some point will be up and running. But thank you. Yeah. And you know, I'm always really passionate about helping people to maximize health and wellness, because it's our birthright. And you know, if we can get there, it's really great. So, and thank you, Peter. Thank you for the invitation. I've really enjoyed it.
Oh, it's a great pleasure. Thank you all for joining us. Have a lovely rest of your Thursday evening. And we'll see you again next week. I think next week is Thursday. I'm going to be chatting to a good friend and old mentor of mine, Peter King, and we'll be getting into mental and emotional techniques for helping stay calm in these crazy times. Awesome. Okay, great. Lots of love.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.